There's a lot of outrage over the release of the new book called Original Sin, President Biden's Decline, its cover-up, and his disastrous choice to run again. It was co-written by CNN's Jake Tapper, who claims it was tough getting anyone to talk. Watch what he has to say.
We spoke with more than 200 people, most of whom, almost all of whom, were Democrats. And almost all of whom wouldn't be honest with us or wouldn't be candid with us until after the election. Knowing then what I know now, I look back at my coverage during the Biden years, and I did cover some of these issues, but not enough. I look back on it with humility. Starting in around 2019, 2020, there were two Bidens. There was a Biden that was perfectly workable, serviceable, seemed fine, and then there was a non-functioning one. That couldn't come up with names of top aides, that would lose his train of thought to an alarming degree.
Well, the Democrats do not want to revisit the election. Take a look at that.
Did you really not have any idea that he was not fit to serve a second term?
Casey, we're looking forward. We have the largest Medicaid cut in front of us. We have the whole federal government at risk.
You're facing all of this because you lost a presidential election. And is that not Joe Biden's responsibility for deciding to run again?
We're looking forward.
That's it?
That's it.
What I can say is that we're not looking backward. We're going to continue to look forward, because at this moment, we've got real problems that need to be addressed on behalf of the American people.
Are they beating a dead horse or what? Will avoiding the issue make people lose more trust in the Democrats and the media?
I definitely spoke out at our table that after the debate that President Biden should step down, but that if he ran, I would still vote for him. I voted for him the first time. I voted for Vice President Harris the second time. But I do think one thing that really irks me on the left, and I don't really have a lot of faith in the right, so you tend to criticize the people that you line up more, that you care more about, and that would be the Democrats for me. People lost trust in them because the voters were saying there was a concern. There were people across the board saying they had a concern. And the Democrats said, no, 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 over here, look over here. They told the voters what to care about, and they did not listen when the voters said they cared. So these stories come out aren't about beating a dead horse. It's saying if they could have a fair conversation that we heard you, we saw it as they saw it, they'd be gaining some of the voters back to say, okay, we're not going to keep saying that.
You agree with that?
No, I don't. I think that I want to move on from why the Democratic Party lost, and I want to hear from the Democratic Party about how we are going to take our country back and how what they are going to do to combat fascism and what they're going to do to stop the Medicaid cuts that are going on, to stop giving tax cuts to billionaires, to stop taking federal workers' pensions away, to stop taking federal jobs away, to stop taking education away, to stop attacking our institutions, to stopping, why is this Trump administration stopping medical research, cancer? I want to talk about why this administration is giving refugee status to South African white Afrikaners as opposed to Afghans and Ukrainians and people of color. That's what I want to talk about.
I think that Sarah's point is that they have to admit what they did wrong before we can move on to that.
But there's also a reality here. Yeah. Just so we know, this table spends a lot of time criticizing Donald Trump, and a lot of it is very valid and needs to happen. But it is a fact his approval rating is 39%.
It's higher than the Democratic Party.
However, Democrats is 27%. People felt gaslit and lied to. In 2023,
part of that, I think the low ratings for the Democrats, I think, partly, I may be making this up, is because they haven't fought hard enough at what she's talking about.
That may be part of it. Not because
they're so angry with the Democrats for being bad.
77% of Americans in 2023 said Joe Biden was too old to run again. And they were told, sit down, shut up, he is the nominee. And then when it became untenable and he stepped aside, they anointed Kamala Harris. There was not a primary, there was not a Democratic process. And then when she lost, they said, don't look backward. We're moving forward. We're not even going to talk about why we didn't listen to you. We had Joe Biden here last week. It was an honor to have him. I think he is a good man. I do not think he could have been president for 4 more years. The hardest job on the planet.
Can this guy be president?
He was elected. I didn't vote for it.
Real quickly, but he also, President Biden took responsibility at this table, which is something that I'm frustrated with the Democrats. He said,
he did take
this falls on me. And I said that was the clearest answer of what people needed to hear.
So look, I have known Joe Biden, I've said 300 times for 25, 30 years. Do I think this is the same man that I knew 25 years ago? No, it's not. Is his voice as strong? No, it's not. Is he more frail? Does he walk with a more faltering step? Yes, he does. He is not the same person. What his spokespeople keep saying is, was there any instance that you can point to where his cognitive skill in performing the job as president was compromised? And they haven't come up with that. I hate these campaign books where people talk anonymously. If you were part of that administration and didn't have the gonads to speak when you were part of that administration, and now you are speaking and doing it anonymously, frankly, I don't think this reflects bad on Joe Biden. I think it reflects bad on you because you are a complicit coward.
Or was there a culture within the White House that people felt that they couldn't speak truth to power?
Frankly, I've never been part of a culture that gets silenced. I have never been a part of a culture that feels fear. I have been a part of a culture that calls a spade where they are in power or not.
People are quoted in this book of saying they would be boxed out of meetings if they raise concerns. And there's very specific examples. George Clooney goes on the record to Jake Tapper and says he moved mountains. He flew in from Italy to do this record fundraiser for Joe Biden. Joe Biden didn't recognize George Clooney. One of the most recognizable, one of the most recognizable men on the planet. And now that's not a presidential duty. It's not the job. You don't have to recognize George Clooney. But does that give you confidence that in the middle of the night, if China's about to attack us, there's a war breaking out in Iran, that he is the sharpest person to be able to handle that?
Which administration texted war plans to their brother?
The Trump. But it's
Was
just
that
like
Joe Biden?
No, but do we just keep lowering the bar because Trump is bad? Nothing else is bad because Trump is bad?
But that can also be true.
Yeah, but the ship has sailed. It's out in the ocean somewhere with Biden.
We have Trump
it's over. Get over it.
No, we have Trump because you guys screwed this up. With all due respect.
All right, but does it help to just keep going over the same material about Biden over and over again?
I actually think we have Trump because the Trump administration, Trump lied to people. I think that's why we have.
Well, he won more votes. That is a fact.
I think he lied to his base. I think he told his base that they were going to, their overtime would not be taxed. That was a lie.
Actually, that's in the new tax bill. It's literally in the tax bill.
They had to fight to put that in. They had to fight to put that back in. He had every intention of taking away that.
That's not true. He ran on no tax on tips, and it's in the tax bill.
Yeah, but it wasn't in it originally. I also think that a lot of people are, and Swazi pointed it out that it wasn't in there. I think the other thing that people need to realize is that they were lied to. Federal workers that voted for him, farmers that voted for him, immigrants that voted for him, they were lied to. That is why we have Trump, not because
and I'm going to give
any other driving
Okay, I'm going to give you the last word. Go ahead.
Look,
just like 30 seconds.
Yeah, I don't think these are normal times, and I think we have too much to do right now to fight the authoritarianism that we are facing on a daily basis and the lack of due process and the threats on our rights to be relitigating this. And I think the reason that we have Trump is because Republicans are cut from a different cloth. And they didn't mind, so many of them didn't mind in 2016 voting for a sexual harasser who we heard boast about assault because they wanted to be in power. And in 2024, they didn't mind voting for a twice impeached guy who had been convicted of 34 felonies because they wanted to be in power.
Go ahead.
Well, and they also, Dems are actually taking a page from Republicans because Republicans didn't want us to look at January 6th. They said, let's just look forward. Don't look at what happened on that day. Look over there. So in a way, it's working. Both parties
how did Joe Biden violate laws? What insurrection did he lead?
What about is not to get the point here.
So Joe Biden,
we just want to keep lowering the bar because
Joe Biden's cognitive decline caused a defeat.
I didn't say
it didn't cost the decay of freedom.
Anna, what I said at this table multiple times is I didn't think anyone was hiding a condition. The problem is aging is progressive. What he looks like today, he's running for a 4-year term. What will he look like next year and 4 years from now?
All right, the New York Housewives show will continue.
He would have quit.